Now, the bhava which is not aspected by its lord is with a malefic planet, or with an evil house lord, 3, 6, 8, 11, or 12, or defeated in planetary war, or in Vriddavashta, Mrita, or Suptavashta. So that's what we're going to be talking about next. First on the chopping block is a bhava that is not aspected by its own lord receives annihilation. Jupiter in this chart, we're using a new, this is Bob Dylan's chart, by the way, for anyone interested. Jupiter does not aspect its own houses. Jupiter's in the sign of Taurus, which means it is going to aspect all the cardinal signs, except for the one adjacent to it. And we know that Jupiter rules Pisces and Sagittarius. So Jupiter has to be in a dual sign in order to aspect its own house. So Jupiter does not aspect its own house, annihilation. Saturn, Rashi aspects its own sign of Capricorn by being in Taurus, because it's a fixed sign, so it's hitting all of the cardinal signs, but it does not aspect its own sign of Aquarius. Which goes to show you that, you know, not every lord can aspect all of its houses. This is something to consider. Only really Jupiter and Mercury can actually hit all of its lords. Well, the sun and moon can too, because they only are a lord of one house. Now, Saturn does not aspect its own sign of Aquarius. The moon, Rashi aspects its own sign of Cancer by being in Taurus here as well. This is a little bit of an extra clue as to why the moon in exalted in Taurus is so strong. Now, the next thing is the bhava lord is conjunct a malefic planet. So we can see here that Jupiter is with the malefic moon as well as Saturn. We know this moon is malefic because it's waning. It's behind the sun. So Jupiter is hit by two different malefic planets here, and therefore it gets two X's. The moon's emotional energy is affecting Jupiter and taking some things away from it, and so is the malefic nature of Saturn, taking something away from Jupiter's ability to provide what it needs for its houses. And that's why these houses are now damaged. Venus and Mercury are conjunct the malefic sun. So Venus is going to get attacked here, and so is the houses that Venus owns, Taurus and Libra. For a Sagittarius, that's the 6th and 11th houses. And we see that Mercury is also conjunct the sun, because the sun is a malefic. So Venus's houses are harmed, and Mercury's houses are harmed. Mars is conjunct malefic Ketu. So this is, all of these are hit. We have to also consider, of course, that the moon, I didn't put this in here, but the moon's house is damaged by being with Saturn, and Saturn is damaged by being with the moon. So just about all of the houses are being afflicted by annihilation through some malefic planet. So far, that's, you know, keep in mind that there's more, it's easier, you know, annihilation creeps up pretty quick, and so does karma, if you know what I mean. There's lots of things that can give you ill karma, less that can give you prosperity. Now, the next point is if the bhava lord is with one of the lords of evil in other such houses. Now, what are these lords of evil, and why are they called that? The lords of the 3rd, 6th, 11th, 8th, and 12th are carrying the heavier shadow aspects of karma with them, because that's the nature of these houses. Everybody must embrace the earth body somehow, and in doing so, we inevitably accrue karma. This must involve identifying at some point with chaotic things in the world, which at some times we have no agency over. Some of these are natural. You know, we all have a 3rd house. We all have a 6th house. We all have debts we've got to work out. We all have an 8th house and the psychoerotic energy that we've got to work out. We all have desires and egotistical dreams of success, idealistic dreams. Now, we all have these, but we don't all have them tied in to this or that house. It's ill for a house if its lord is conjunct an evil house lord, because then it is bonded to that chaotic energy and doomed to be entangled in it, reducing its stability. This devitalizes the planet and the houses it rules. The planet becomes no longer reliable because the chaotic evil lord will constantly obstruct it. Just for an example, we see that Jupiter here is with the evil 8th lord moon, because Cancer rules the 8th house for a Sagittarius. So keep in mind that by being conjunct the planet, and conjunctions here is not the same thing as we know it by degrees. In Gemini astrology, a conjunction just means that a planet is in the same sign as another planet. Even if the Saturn was at 1 degrees, it would still be conjunct Jupiter, which is at 29 degrees, by being in the same Rashi. So we see that Jupiter is with the 8th lord, the moon, and it's also with Saturn, which is the 3rd lord, so it's going to get damaged here. So before we just show the example, we want to consider, why is it that these lords of evil will mess with a house lord? Consider the 3rd, desire, sensation, necessary evolution, and expressing the personality. Everybody has this need to constantly progress. In Bob Dylan's sake, we see the personality, because Jupiter rules the 1st house of personality and physique. We see that this Jupiter is constantly facing a need to be more. The personality feels like it's not enough. At least, especially this Anupachaya house, so this would have gotten better over time for Bob Dylan, the person who owns this house. Now, let's consider the 6th house. It's about debt, neurotic body energy, enemies, adversaries, work, and routine. Everybody has to work this stuff out. Now, if one of your planets is conjunct the 6th lord, then it is bound to be stressed. It's bound to be used in order to get all of those necessary things out of the way. Here we see the Sun and Mercury are conjunct Venus as the 6th lord. What about the 8th lord? It's marriage, mutual energy investment with others, sexual and psychic bonding. We see the Jupiter, the 1st lord, the personality of Bob Dylan, might have been found to try to build itself by the influence of other people, big projects, and using other people to help it build its personality, which in turn reduces its need to affect its own and to learn about its own personality. The consciousness of other people, of the moon, the 8th lord, would have obstructed this 1st lord and the 4th lord in this way, since Jupiter rules the 1st and 4th houses. So, read on your own time what the 11th and the 12th means as well, because it's the same kind of picture. So we see here that Jupiter is with the evil 8th lord, the moon, as well as the evil 3rd lord, Saturn. So these two houses receive 2 points of annihilation. Of course, these Pisces and Sagittarius are ruled by Jupiter, so these two houses receive 2. Now Saturn is with the evil 8th lord, the moon, so its 2 houses are diminished. And the moon is with the evil 3rd lord, Saturn, so the Cancer will be diminished. Then the Sun and Mercury are with evil 6th and 11th lord, Venus. Venus rules the 6th house and the 11th house for a Sagittarius, making it particularly capable of evil. This isn't such a bad thing if it's placed in the right place, but this evil tendency, the egotistical tendencies of the 6th and the 11th house are damaging to the Sun, and therefore to its house, Leo, the 9th house, as well as to the 7th house and the 10th house of Sagittarius. In Bob Dylan's case, we could see that the constant need to re-up his finances and also to bolster his image in the world and his career, these might have actually damaged his true dharmic resolve and desire to do good things in the world, or at least his own satisfaction of hitting his own spiritual mark. He might have been taken under by the glories of this egotistical Venus, although it did probably help him get the fame that he did in the world. This Venus is also conjunct Mercury, and therefore the 7th and 10th houses are also damaged by being there. And so these houses express annihilation. Now, planetary war is one of the figures that Parashara gives us, and it's something that's rather complicated. It's when two planets are about within 1 degree of each other. Ernst Wilhelm has a great video on this subject for free on YouTube. So if two planets are close to 1 degree from each other. It can actually be about 5 degrees, depending, according to Ernst. And this is excluding the sun and moon, because they are the king and queen. Also, this is excluding Rahu and Ketu, right? So sun, moon, Rahu, and Ketu cannot be in planetary war. Now, if you see that 2 planets are close enough that they could be in planetary war and they're not one of these 4 planets, then what you do is you go on Kala. I've found an example of somebody, it happens to be Donald Trump, who is experiencing this Yuddha, this planetary war. So what you do, I've gone on to Trump's chart, I'm going to look up his Shad Bala, and I'm going to look for plus or minus for Yuddha. I go all the way over, and I can see that Venus is getting positive points from this Yuddha, and Saturn is getting negative points, which means that Saturn is defeated in planetary war. That's how you're going to check that. So, in this case, Saturn, at least in Trump's chart, is defeated in planetary war. It's under Venus's thumb. So, the planet defeated in war is under its victor planet's thumb, and this causes great strife to the defeated Kal planet, the Yuddha planet, during its dasha, during transits, and it causes annihilation to its ruling houses. So in Trump's case, that Saturn, whatever the, he's a Leo rising, so that would be the 6th and 7th houses are experiencing annihilation because of that. To look up more about the specifics on this, I suggest looking up Ernst Wilhelm's video on the subject. So now the next thing is the last thing that we're going to talk about, which is more on these 3 Avashtas. And they're essentially the same as what we've already been given. Vriddha Avashta, Mrita Avashta, these are points of annihilation. And then if a planet is sleeping, Supta or Sushupti is another word for it. If it's in an enemy or debilitation sign, then it is going to have annihilation. So we can see for the Baladi Avashtas, we know that if a planet is in Vriddha or Mrita Avashta, that's the latter degrees of an odd sign, annihilation is indicated. It's the switch for an even sign like Scorpio. If a planet is in the first 0 to 12 degrees, then it is experiencing annihilation. And then lastly, of course, is the Supta, sleeping Avashta. So when we put it all together, this is what our master list looks like. We can see a house occupied, a Rashi aspected by a benefic gets prosperity. Now secondarily, a house's well-being is indicated if it has any of these. If it's in Kumara or Yuva Avashta, if it's Jagrat, or if it's in the 10th house. Finally, a house lord that is not aspecting its own house, or if the house lord is conjunct a malefic planet, it's conjunct an evil house lord, if it's defeated in planetary war, if it's in Vriddha or Mrita Avashta, or if it is Supta Sushupti, sleeping, then its annihilation is indicated. So, we have 2 last points to sort of consider. Number 1, this is just points that I want to throw at you just because I found them useful. A benefic planet blesses the house it's in, but it does not bless the houses of a planet that it is conjunct. With malefics, it's reversed. A malefic planet damages the houses owned by a planet it conjuncts, or an evil house lord. So a house can only be annihilated by another evil or malefic planet if that evil, malefic planet is actually conjunct the lord of the house in question. So a malefic planet doesn't cause annihilation to a house by occupying it. For example, the Saturn in Pisces, this is a Scorpio rising, Pisces is not being damaged by Saturn being in the 5th house. Now consider a malefic planet that occupies a house. It does put tension on it. And some inauspicious and auspicious Jaimini yogas are sometimes built on the tension of a malefic planet in a house. It's not annihilation. Remember, we're talking about chapter 11, which has these specific points about annihilation. A malefic or evil lord in a house does not cause annihilation. It's neutral in the sense of what this particular chapter is conveying. Now, it'll be a different story if, for Pisces, in this case, if Jupiter is there with that Saturn, because the Saturn is a malefic, now Pisces and Sagittarius are going to feel it. Saturn also doubles in its malefic energy by being the third lord for a Scorpio rising. So now this Pisces and Sagittarius are going to feel the damage of this Saturn. So a house can only be ruined by a malefic or evil graha by interacting with the dispositor of the house lord. And then the final hint to remember is that Svapna Avashta is neutral, and so is Bala Avashta. Parashara doesn't mention these two states in this shloka, so that lets us know that they're just neutral. They don't lean towards prosperity or annihilation, and you would have to combine them with other figures in order for them to lean towards prosperity or annihilation. So now that we've given the basic statutes of what constitutes prosperity versus annihilation of a house, the next thing we're going to do is just go through an example of what we might be sort of thinking about when it comes to cropping these up and doing this little point system that I've been talking about. So this is Kala. We're looking at the same chart. This is Bob Dylan's chart. Now we are going to go into our notes, just so you can kind of see what I like to do. You know, if you actually want to know how I like to do these things, what I'll do is I'll take a report. I'll print out, Kala has a function where you can print out reports. You can see all the planets in the houses, and then I will actually write them down on a report. So it's always there. But for those of you who are just using Kala, it's sufficient to just go to the notepad or to just use some way that you can mark these down. Now, first thing we're going to do, just as an example, I've already given us the aspects of the sun. The sun is the 9th lord for Sagittarius rising. Now, this sun is in the 7th house, and it is with Venus and Mercury. So, we have noticed, first of all, there's no prosperity towards the sun. And this is, in fact, this would be relating to Leo, right? Because there are no benefic aspects of any benefic planets in any of the cardinal signs that could go towards the sign of Leo. Remember, it's the sign, it's the house that you would want to be seeing that benefic aspect, not on the sun itself. So, the sign of Leo has no benefic planets Rashi aspecting it. Now, first thing we notice is that the sun is at 3 degrees of an odd sign, Gemini. That puts it in Bala Avashta, neutral. It's in the sign of a natural neutral planet, Gemini. Mercury is naturally neutral to the sun, so it's Svapna Avashta, which is also a neutral. It doesn't show prosperity or annihilation. Where the sun gets hit with annihilation is particularly from being with Venus. Venus is the 6th and 11th lord of Sagittarius, which means that this sun receives 2 annihilation points from that. And as well, the sun being in Gemini, it Rashi aspects the other dual signs, and it does not Rashi aspect Leo. So we give it another point of annihilation. Now, as you go on, when you go further, you can even do this with different Varga charts. I tend to use, in particular, mostly the Navamsha chart and the D60, the Shastiyamsha chart. You can see the sign of Leo for Bob Dylan has Mercury and Jupiter aspecting from Aries, and that's the only thing, as well as its own sign. The sun in Capricorn is also aspecting its own sign in the D60 chart, although that doesn't technically count as prosperity. The only time we consider the Lord is aspecting its own sign is when it doesn't aspect its own sign. Then it's considered an annihilation point. This goes to show you that it's easier to get annihilation than it is to get prosperity. And then as well, we can see in the Navamsha, the D9, we have Mercury and Venus aspecting Leo from cardinal signs. Venus is in Capricorn and in the Navamsha, and it's aspecting Leo. And as well, Mercury is in Aries in the Navamsha, and it's aspecting Leo. Overall, not considering, remember, even when we are doing a full consideration of the annihilation here, I just don't even consider the Vargas. We should just be looking strictly from the Rashi chart. That is something for you to consider. Overall, we have the annihilation from Venus and from the Lord not aspecting its own house. 3 points of annihilation. I would call this strong annihilation. It's got no prosperity. The sun is having a hard time holding down the agenda of the 9th house of Bob Dylan. We can see this in Bob Dylan's bitterness at the end of his life. He's always got a scowl, always feeling like he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing, you know? So the next thing we're going to want to do is look at Jupiter as the first lord, just for another quick example, okay? And we're going to go through this. So what is Jupiter's Avashta status? It is in an even sign, and it's at 29 degrees. We know that 29 degrees 29 degrees of an even sign is going to be Bala. So we put it as Bala Avashta, and we know that it is not going to have any prosperity or annihilation just from that alone. Jupiter is in the sign of Taurus, which is an enemy to Jupiter. Venus is an enemy to Jupiter. That means that our Jupiter is in Sushupti Avashta, and that is a point of annihilation. Now, does this Jupiter have any benefic aspects to it? Well, we can see that Taurus is a fixed sign. None of the cardinal signs have benefics in it, so no. Jupiter does not. Sorry. Already I'm messing myself up. Jupiter owns the 1st and 4th house. These do, in fact, have some prosperity points. We can see that Venus is here, and Venus is aspecting Pisces and Sagittarius. So we're going to put that Venus is aspecting, and that is a positive prosperity point. As well, Mercury is considered a benefic. Mercury, by being with Venus here, is considered a benefic. So, because it's so close to Venus, Mercury will tend to blend into the nature of whatever planet it's closest to. So we see that Mercury here is also aspecting Pisces and Sagittarius. Therefore, Mercury aspecting is going to be a positive indication as well. So far, even those 2 benefics are hugely helping this house. We would actually consider them to have 2 pluses. Then the next up, what else would we consider for Jupiter? Well, there is more annihilation here than we would hope. First of all, the malefic moon aspecting, conjunct, which is minus. We also have malefic Saturn conjunct, which is minus. We also have the 8th lord moon conjunct, which is minus. And finally, we have the 3rd lord Saturn conjunct, which is minus. So that's 4 aspects of annihilation, plus the Sushupti Avashta. This really shows that there's a lot of negativity going towards this Jupiter. But it does have some prosperity points. I would say overall that this would probably be I would call it mild annihilation, all things considered, because the annihilation points kind of pile up more so than the benefic points. I would also state, though, that it also has moderate prosperity. We even might say, I suppose it might even be better to switch these so that this has more of a moderate annihilation with, my instincts even telling me that I should say, really, that this is a moderate annihilation, moderate prosperity. Now, as I sit and digest this, just goes to show you that, this is the going by feel that you need to really do here. Really, I would even call this a strong annihilation with moderate prosperity. If it had other things for prosperity going towards it, it might be better. strong annihilation, moderate prosperity feels pretty strong of what I would do. So this Jupiter is going to get what it needs in order to produce the first house and the fourth house, and the agenda is given there, but it will have obstructions to that at the same time. So it's a little bit of a different science than you're used to thinking of, but this is considered to be very important, and it's this high in the priority of Parashara for a reason. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you learned something from it. I'm Dustin Cormier. I hope you guys continue your journey to self-realization through astrology. Hope you enjoyed this.